Various agricultural practices has been put on the spotlight for destruction of the environment and directly contributing towards global warming. Farmers and other stakeholders in the agricultural sector have been challenged to reevaluate and improve their practices to be sustainable and ecologically friendly. In view of this, join Professor Dr. Hamadi Idi Boga, PS Crop Development and Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Victor Mugo, Regional Coordinator, ClimateSmart Agriculture Youth Network, CSAYN. Victor Gadogo, Advocacy Advisor, Climate and Energy, SNV. Nancy Rapando, Committee Member, ClimateSmart Agriculture Multi-Stakeholder Platform, CSA MSP, Kenya. Hosted by Brenda Zeda on KTN News and KTN Farmers TV.
Welcome back. The discussion this morning is all about climate-smart agriculture in the wake of climate change. You can engage us on our social media platform at Farm Kenya 254 on Twitter, and also KTN News KE, hashtag Farm Kenya, and also on slido.com. The event code is Farm Kenya. Talking about your engagement with us, having this conversation with us, as we also have it with our guests this morning. I'd like to have a look at some of your questions that you've sent via slido.com with the event code hashtag Farm Kenya, and just going through some of them have been answered by our panelists. I know the first question, it's about let me just read it correctly. It says, good morning, Forum, KTN Farmers TV and KTN News. Our only issue is what we never is that we never get this kind of information from the county extension offices in the rural areas. This is something that I'd actually asked PS Boga about, messages of smart farming reaching people at the rural areas. So PS, kindly take note of that question. And also the other question is from Joel Hobondo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Joel Hobondo, who says, thank you from Kenya for the discussion. I have some questions. One, why is climate change risks narrowed down to flood, drought, and extreme temperatures? That question should be answered by Nancy. And Nancy, kindly take note of that question, but not other disasters or risks like storms, earthquakes. And two, how is the mouth contributing to the GHG emissions in line with NDC? So I'd like Mugo to take note of that, the second question about emissions, and then he goes ahead to ask the third question. Circular economy, part of mitigation options. Mr. Gadho, kindly take note of that. And what is the status of reduced consumption of animal products and species shift advocacy in Kenya as alternative options to reduced GHG emissions? So Mr. Gadhogo, also take note of that. You know, what is the status of reduced consumption of animal products and species shifts advocacy in Kenya as an alternative options to reduced GHG emissions? But let me bring in PS. Kindly respond to that. It's actually the same question I'd asked you about people at the rural areas not getting the information about this smart farming, the climate smart agriculture. And so he's not given us his name, but he says our only issue is that we never get this kind of information from the county extension offices in the rural areas. Bwana PS, over to you.
I think extension is a devolved function, and in our projects we involve extension workers for the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, as well as the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusive Growth Project. Both of them, we work with the counties and the extension system. So I think it's just a question of making sure that the messages go down. FAO also has a whole system. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing a plot in my mother's farm, a demo plot for conservation agriculture. And FAO is working in most of the counties also, extending the same kind of knowledge. But there are also other civil society organizations like World Vision, One Acre Fund, TechnoServe, who are also working with farmers. I think what needs to happen is to harmonize our messages and to make sure that the message of productivity, but productivity which is climate smart, is ingrained in the minds of the farmers.
All right.
Even like the Bishop Masika in Yatta, what he's practicing is conservation agriculture, and he has created commercial villages. But when you move around, you find the climate is intact, water is efficiently used, and the productivity is not very heavy on the environment.
All right, but then PS, just let me just stay with this question just for a minute. Let me just stay with you when it comes to this question. When you talk about these messages, the information from the county extension offices in the rural areas, how is this message passed down to the farmer in the rural areas? Is it through TV, radio, or newspaper advertisement, or is it through door-to-door information?
You know, the extension workers are trained on how to do their work. And so we assume when we talk to an extension worker, they will choose the method that is best suited to them. Most farmers don't have TVs, I would say. So mostly it's farmer groups and organizing farmers into groups and reaching those groups through their leaders and other means so that the practice is adopted widely.
Right.
But of course, there are other channels like radio, mostly. In the ministry, we have the Agricultural Resource Information Center, which does videos, does audios, does the Mkulima radio or something like that. Mm-hmm. That also attempts to reach the farmers in one way or the other. Right. Calro has a whole portal with information about how to produce in a smart way, which varieties for which region, which practices, good agronomic practices. So Calro also is a repository of all the information that is needed by farmers.
Right.
And Calro is also hosting the agro-weather information big data platform that is supported by the Kenya ClimateSmart Agriculture Project. And you can download, for those with a smartphone, you can download this Kenya agro weather information on your smartphone, which can tell you about whether it will be raining in the next 10 days or how the weather will be.
All right.
So that you farm smart, you harvest smart, you dry smart. Sometimes people put the maize on the roadside to dry, when in the evening it will rain, and they can easily know that from the agro weather information.
Right. All right.
So it's a whole basket of sources, and we hope people will choose the basket that is more suited to their circumstance.
All right. I like the way you put it. It's a whole basket, but you have to choose the basket that fits you well in terms of getting the information. So Nancy, the reason as to why I'm directing the next question to you, that is being asked by Joel, who says, I have some questions. There are several questions. And I wanted you to respond to the first question, where he's asking, why is climate change risks narrowed down to flood, drought, and extreme temperatures, but not other disasters like storms, earthquake? And the reason as to why I'm directing this question to you is because you're a specialist when it comes to matters climate change.
Okay, thank you so much, Brenda. The climate change discourse is actually more of a scientific discourse. And when you look at globally, when we started the discussions, you find that there is a special body called the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change that looks at the science behind climate change. So it is this body that generated evidence on the need to narrow down climate change into those parameters that I'm talking about. But also as a country, those are the main ones that affect us. Because when you talk about a storm and you are in the US, you will be implying to heavy rainfall. That's what they call a storm. So I think it is because of that scientific body that has helped us to identify what are the climate risks and how to narrow them down to that. The question of earthquakes are mainly also associated with land forming aspects, but also it's not really a common episode in our country like Kenya. So that is why as Kenya, our concern should be more about the floods, the droughts, and the intensifying temperatures, the increasing temperatures, but the issue issue of earthquakes is not also common, but is more of a land-forming disaster, a land-forming related disaster, rather than a disaster that is related to the increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's the answer that I can give him.
All right. And so let me bring in Mugo. The other question that Joel had is, how is MALF contributing to reduce the GHG emissions in line with the NDC?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that question was more suited for Professor Hamadi Boga, because they ask, how can the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries contribute towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions? But I think I can give a go at it. So in Kenya, we've noticed that 90% of all emissions come from especially two sectors. One is the livestock sector, and land management and land use change. So those two sectors are the ones that have been prioritized in the NDC. And so what the government has done is try to convene everyone within the agricultural space to think about climate-smart agriculture. And so by this, first they have established the climate-smart agriculture multi-stakeholder platform, for which I am also part of, so that we can already start convening all stakeholders. What are you doing? What are you doing in this, and how can we best spread awareness about climate-smart agriculture to even the people who do not know about it? So the first thing is the multi-stakeholder platform. The other thing that I have seen, and creation of awareness, the other thing that I've seen is that the government came up with the Kenya Climate-Smart Agriculture Strategy that will span between 2018 to 2026. And this Climate-Smart strategy really looks at what are some of the ways that we can be able to prioritize some climate-smart interventions, which really reduce on greenhouse gas emissions. The other thing that I have seen also is that the government is doing a lot of research especially on climate-smart agriculture. To this end, I can speak of work that is ongoing called the climate risk profiles that have been released. And so these are documents that are about a county. And so for the first time, each county has a document that talks about the risks that they face in that county and some of the priority value chains that they are involved in. For example, in Kisumu, it might be beans, or it might be fisheries, and in that regard. Right. So the government really has done a lot of research to be able to understand where climate change is happening in which sectors, and what are the ways that the common mwananchi can be able to be involved to solve these questions.
All right. And before we move on to a discussion, I'd like Mr. Gadhogo to respond to this final question. What is the status of reduced consumption of animal products and species shifts advocacy in Kenya as an alternative options to reduce GHG emissions?
Thanks, Brenda. I want to appreciate Joel for that question. Maybe at this point I will just define what a circular economy is. Of course, that is an economy that eliminates, the waste that is generated, and of course, looking at also what resources goes into, production of a certain product. So, going back to his question on is circular economy part of mitigation options? Indeed, it is part of the mitigation option, and of course, that is a new, it's a new catchphrase when it comes to, fighting climate change. And circular economy is really picking up with extractive industries in Kenya, whereby we are seeing a lot of interventions. As we all know, agriculture is the backbone of our economy. So we are seeing a lot of those principles being embedded into such practices. Just to give an example, for example, we've seen farmers who do a lot of, farmers who keep cattle for dairy, investing a lot on biogas systems. And as I'd mentioned initially, the greenhouse gases that come up from such kind of, agricultural practices, we're able to mitigate against production of such gases that, of course, contribute to climate change. Right. Going to his second question on the status of reduced consumption and animal products and species, and, shifts towards advocacy as an alternative to fight, greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we've seen shifts whereby a lot of people nowadays are preferring to be vegetarians simply because Scientific evidence has shown us that, and of course also in Kenya, livestock keeping contributes a lot of greenhouse gases, and this, of course, affects our climate.
Right.
So we've seen a lot of sensitization when it comes to meal preferences, whereby a lot of people now are moving towards, vegetarian, food sources, simply because they want to reduce on the carbon footprint that, comes with production of certain animal products. For example, meat products. We've seen a lot of energy is needed to to keep the food cold. If you're talking about cold chain solutions, you're talking about when that animal product is transported from the slaughterhouse to the terminal market. And you've seen the cases in Kenya whereby we have a lot of transport. We buy the animals in the north and they're transported here to Nairobi, maybe Dagoretti, Kiamaiko, or some slaughterhouses, Neema slaughterhouse, where we buy these animals. So for the case of Kenya, simply it's all about preferences, and we've really seen a lot of people intentionally moving towards being vegetarian, simply because they're also taking care of the environment and, of course, looking at how we can all contribute towards fighting this monster that is with us called climate change. All right, and talking about preferences, PS Boga, so which is the best way to go when it comes to comparison? Is it between, is it actually climate smart agriculture or organic farming? Which one is the best?
We need to frame the question differently by saying
okay, let me try.
One,
let me try.
I've already framed it. I've already framed it for you. Now, the most important thing is that we need to invest in knowledge systems. So knowledge generation and the application of knowledge in addressing all the challenges that we are grappling with. So investing in KALRO, ICRAF, ILRI, universities, so that they produce the body of knowledge that will tell us what is happening with our environment, whether we are making progress or stagnating. So I think we need to invest in understanding. And our decision-making processes must be informed by that knowledge, both at the policy level as well as at the farm level and at the operational level. So I think that is investment number one. And this will tell us about our farming systems and how to improve them, from conventional farming, which we all agree has a heavy footprint on the climate, to more ecologically friendly farming. But this has to be defined. And its impact on food availability, affordability, and accessibility also factored in. So it's not a yes or no answer. It's a question that we have to answer long term. The most important thing is that our farming practices should minimize the impact on the climate. And the farmer needs to adapt to a changing climate and to build resilience. Those are two key areas. They must adapt and they must build resilience. And to do that, they need this knowledge, which we must provide as scientific organizations.
And PS, the reason I was asking you which is better when it comes to comparison between the climate-smart agriculture and organic agriculture, it's because, organic agriculture is defined by the methods of production, because, there is no use of synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. However, many of the practices are used, that are used in organic farming are climate-smart.
Yeah, I agree, but the body of knowledge, because right now, for example, I'm wrestling with locusts for the last 1 year. And there was option of using biopesticides and also using synthetic pesticides. And so when we used biopesticides, for example, it was not working because it's too cold. And so the locusts keep on flying even after you have sprayed them with a biopesticide. So sometimes you use the option that is more suited for that particular circumstance as you look for solutions which require investments more into research. So the answers are not as simple because we are dealing with very complex phenomena, the most important thing is that our choices must be informed by knowledge and not emotions.
All right, and I go with what you've said. I go with what you said. You're correctly right. Whether it's climate smart agriculture, organic agriculture, it has to be used depending on the season that the farmers are in. But then let me bring in Mugo, and the reason as to why I'm directing this question to you, Mugo, is because you're a young person who's also into farming. So talk to us about technology and climate smart agriculture.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for that question. And what we've noticed as an organization is that technology really is a game changer for endearing young people into agriculture. And we've noticed some of the technologies that are there that really young people are coming up with that are transforming the way agriculture is done, but also is also helping to endear young people into agriculture. I could give numerous examples of some of the technologies that we've seen that are there. But with climate smart technologies, again, they also need to take into consideration that first, they are increasing agricultural production and increasing agricultural productivity, and in that way also contributing towards better livelihoods and incomes for farmers. Then the second thing is that they should also build the resilience of the farmers towards climate change. And the third is, where possible, they can also be used to contribute or to remove greenhouse gas emissions. Let me give one example that is sometimes not discussed as a technology, but really is. Let's think of a biogas digester. That first, the biogas digester uses manure very well, and so that manure does not create a lot of methane that is released as a greenhouse gas emission. And that biogas also creates fuel, and that fuel then makes sure that we do not cut down on trees. That also helps us to save on lighting if it's used for lighting, and also for cooking in that regard. And the other thing is that the slurry that is created out of that biogas can be used as fertilizer, as organic fertilizer. So we see such a simple quote-unquote technology being used, having all these aspects that we call climate smart agriculture.
All right.
One thing that I I think hope to discuss is digital technologies that disseminate climate information services. We have seen that especially young people are very technologically savvy, and they might have smartphones. And we have seen, especially within our network, young people receiving alerts on their phones. For example, it's going to rain between now till next week or such a date, and so this is the optimal planting date. And so that brings about precision once you're getting into agriculture. And I think that precision is what we require so that we can be able to adapt to climate change.
All right. And just before I bring in Nancy into this conversation, I'd like to pick the mind of the PS. PS Bog, I'd just like to pick your mind on this social protection for the vulnerable farmers during the season of climate change.
In many ways, we can do social protection. This time, during the COVID, we mainly relied on cash transfers to those vulnerable families. There are databases available with the State Department of Social Protection and also with the Ministry of Devolution. And there is a program funded by the World Bank through Treasury, through those ministries, to support those who are food insecure and who are vulnerable in times of climate. We have a population of about 1.4 million who are permanently food insecure, and they receive these social safeguards or safety net through cash transfers. In the past, we used to distribute food physically, but we have moved away from that so that we give dignity to the recipients of this social protection. The other programs of support through inputs to support livelihood are also supported by government and also other organizations like FAO and other NGOs to support the same vulnerable segment as part of inclusion, social inclusion, financial literacy, so that we can move away from social protection and safety net into the commercial part of the society.
Right, right. And Nancy, I'd like to, I know you might tell me that the PS is in a better position to answer this question I'm about to ask you. Let me use that disclaimer before I direct this question to you. But the reason, again, the reason as to I'm directing this question to you is because you had talked about it when we were, in the middle of the conversation. We're talking about, aren't you to talk to us about some of the policy processes and instruments to support climate-smart agriculture? Because you talked about policies.
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. I think Kenya is one of those countries that has made a big step ahead in terms of making our producing policies that are climate responsive. Kenya is a country we started with the National Climate Change Action Plan. I think that was from 2012-2017, and now we have a revised NCAP for 2018 to 2022. But we also have, that was followed by the National Climate Change Response Strategy that was very critical in helping partners understand what they're supposed to do to respond to climate change. Now we have a climate finance policy, but at the Ministry of Agriculture, we have the ClimateSmart Agriculture Strategy and the implementation framework. These are critical policies with clear policy statements, with clear interventions on what you need to do to embrace climate change. The recently developed agriculture strategy, agriculture growth and transformation strategy, which is called the ASTGS, it also has a clear chapter on climate response. So we have a number of policies embracing that. We know that the Climate Change Department was set up to, the Climate Change Directorate was set up to support that, the Climate Change Council that is headed by the President, but at the ministry level, we have the climate change units. The Ministry of Agriculture has a climate change unit whose responsibility is to roll out those climate change policies in the ministry. And I think that is where it has one of the challenges that the policy frameworks bring out is stakeholder coordination and lack of capacities across stakeholders. And that's the reason why the multi-stakeholder platform was set up. We want to bring stakeholders together, coordinate them in terms of learning and reporting, but we also have a number of other strategies in these frameworks that really detail what the country needs to be doing in response to climate change. So we have a number of policies to address climate change in Kenya, and the counties are also now either integrating climate change in the CIDPs or developing stand-alone climate change policy frameworks at the county level.
All right. And you
so
know,
as a country, I think on policies, we've done good work.
All right. All right. And it's good if you've talked about...
We have a challenge to ensure they're implemented down to the grassroots.
All right. All right. Thank you, Nancy. And it's good you've also mentioned about, stakeholders. And Kathogo, talking about the role of various stakeholders, and you work for an organization that is a stakeholder, a stakeholder in matters as smart, climate smart agriculture. And talking about the roles of various stakeholders in the national planning and budgeting processes and availability, talk to us about the availability policy tools and instruments that governments have at their disposal to promote climate smart agriculture from a stakeholder's point of view.
Thanks, Brenda, for the question. Indeed, as stakeholders, we have a role to play when it comes to implementing what the government is coming up with, the policy interventions. And of course, we have various tools that we've rolled out both at national level and at county level that, of course, seek to address many issues that Nancy has raised, including issues of capacity. So what we've done is, of course, as SNV Netherlands Development is come up with projects that also seek to enhance the capacity of farmers associations. I want to draw lessons from what we've done with, what we are currently doing, the Climate Resilient Agriculture for Tomorrow project that is nationwide in Kenya. And what we are doing is that we are going out to farmers out there to build their capacity when it comes to running associations professionally. So what we are doing is now coming up with tools that will inform business planning, very important because we don't want just farmers to grow the crop and sell it at the gate. And with all those interventions that my previous from the panelists have mentioned, so much investments going into climate smart agriculture technologies, and we are looking at how do we ensure now that farmers get returns on their investment. So we come up with interventions and tools that seek to enhance their capacity. One such case is when we are coming, we actually bringing together farmers together into farmer association groups so that they are able to aggregate their food crops and be able to sell it out, to the market. And one of the things that we've noticed that is leveraging farmers is when they grow crops that are considered climate smart crops. Like when we just briefly discussed about, the high-yielding beans that my fellow panelists has mentioned, Mugo, on what they are growing, but also looking at how can we support, farmers access such kind of information. Additionally, when it comes to implementing policies on climate smart agriculture, we are working together with, of course, the county governments. Very important that they also we continue to build their capacities when it comes to, for them to enforce their mandate when it comes to extension workers, but also working with government closely, because I believe every stakeholder has a role when it comes to ensuring that we transition our agriculture sector into a climate smart one, but also looking at how do we ensure that the products that we produce reach to the intended consumers, and the intended consumers enjoy a good source of crop or rich beef, but they also know that indeed such are grown in, considering that climate change is here with us.
Right. And just before I bring in Mugo, so PS Boga, you can agree with me that by providing incentives and, maybe just removing barriers in adoption, government can create a conducive environment and instruments that, environment for producers to adopt climate smart agriculture practices?
Yeah, incentive is one tool, but I don't think incentive is the only tool. I think the most important tool is knowledge and awareness and a deliberate willingness on the part of the producer and the consumer to demand products that are climate friendly. And that is the biggest incentive is the fear that we could destroy our environment. If everybody understands that, then everybody has to shift. Whether there is money or no money, it's our behavior that has to shift. Because sometimes you find if you cut a tree so that you can make charcoal, you're being selfish. And if you are being told that your activities are harmful to the environment, I think that should be, and you have understood that, and I don't think there's anybody in the world who hasn't understood that. I think we all need, by our conscience, to shift our behavior because it's destroying the planet. And as we incentivize, the incentives should be given to people who lack options so that we can create new options for them. And not incentives to reward people who don't want to change their behavior.
So you're saying kitu kidogo hakuna?
Hakuna kitu kidogo. We don't have to bribe our people for them to know that this is bad. We have to educate them to appreciate that this is bad and that they need to change. Otherwise, it will make them poor and it will make them food insecure. Because if you destroy the environment, everything lives from the environment.
All right. Thank you, PS Boga. So, Mugo, let's talk about the role of the private sector in the climate smart agriculture, because, the objective is to be achieved. If it's objectives, of the climate smart agriculture is to be achieved, it depends in the large part on engagement of the civil society.
Okay. And so I think that question just narrows down into everyone coming into one basket so that we can be able to push the narrative of climate smart agriculture. And I really believe that everyone is crucial. There's this saying that says that the greatest threat to a planet is the belief that someone else will be able to save it for ourselves. And I think what we need to come to realize is that all of us are needed in this discourse. And the private sector, the civil society, government, the youth, women, everyone needs to come so that we can be able to push this narrative of climate-smart agriculture.
All right.
Okay.
No, continue.
So in this regard, and I think we have already spoken about it, is the ClimateSmart multi-stakeholder platform, because it does not just bring together government, it comes really from government, but it brings together, for example, myself, who works with young people. It brings my fellow panelists, who is from a development organization. It brings private sector organizations, such as insurance companies, who can be able to help farmers to be able to cope, especially once climate change affects their farming. So I really believe in the transformation and the transformative part that really multi-stakeholders platforms can create.
All right. So, Mr. Gazogo, so how can NGOs also support the testing and scaling up of the climate-smart agriculture system?
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Indeed, NGOs play a big role simply because they have the muscle and they have the expertise in-house. So what we've done is, looking at how we can pilot some of these best practices when it comes to testing and scaling. We've seen cases whereby we increasingly work with farmers directly, setting up demonstration plots, demonstration units that farmers can learn from each other. And through such opportunities that NGOs provide to farmers, they're able to, spread the knowledge, but also learn from each other. Additionally, looking at, when it comes to best practice internationally, some of these NGOs have networks across the globe. So they're able to see really, coming up with solutions that can work for local problems. Rather than just transferring technologies, we've worked together, with farmers to pilot and being able to, draw lessons from such piloting schemes, but also such piloting schemes are able to inform even private sector when it comes to, investments, investment for scaling, investments for, to ensure that if farmers are producing such products, they're able to sell, to private sector. And maybe just to chime in on what Mugo was speaking about, the role of private sector, because I believe private sector actually are important to bridge the gap when it comes to market access, which is very important for farmers in the age of ensuring that farmers, of course, are able to access markets. Private sector, is playing a big role. And we've seen cases whereby even at NGO level, we are forced to work with private sector simply because they have the financial muscles to do R&D, research and development, but also they have the financial muscle to diversify and come into those regions that already do not have, maybe the government has played its part and they're now looking to open up the market. So maybe just those are my observations as what we can continually improve on how farmers adopt climate-smart agriculture interventions.
All right, and it's good you're talking about bridging that gap and the government playing its role. So Nancy, when you talk about financing of climate-smart agriculture, do you agree with me? Then do you agree with me just based on what Mr. Gazogo has talked about, that the private sector also have a role to play in terms of financing?
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. We are getting out of a week of excitement because the KCB Bank has just been accredited to be receiving climate finance. And if you saw from yesterday's Nation newspaper, I think a number of organizations, KCB talks of a number of organizations, and I think there is a program on climate smart sugar as one of the pipeline from Solidaridad, really a brainchild that I've been working on together with my teams, that funding a climate resilient sugar sector. And I think KCB is looking at such sectors. So climate finance is important. KCB, a local bank, gives us a hope, and the fact that it uses green as its brand means that they need to prioritize agriculture when they are funding their climate resilient innovations. So we're really looking forward that the country and the policy frameworks will keep on building private finance that is going to support farming communities. I would like to say that, just to add on what you asked, Victor, the private finance, the private sector, one of their entrance points is certification and carbon markets. They can do this because they can even access more carbon finance when they have climate resilient innovations. So I think the private sector has a big role to play. They have a role to play in terms of reducing their greenhouse gases. They are the best option we have, but they also have an option of ensuring that the communities they work with down are also resilient so that they get more that they want. But I think when we talk about climate finance, I think KCB gives us the best case, but we also are hoping that the Treasury, that is the nationally designated authority for climate finance in Kenya, will keep approving more private sector to access this finance so that they fund more SMEs, they fund more private factories to undertake a climate smart pathway. So I think the private sector would be the best way for us thinking about scale up.
So Nancy, if I got you correctly, if I understood you correctly, are you trying to say that the private financing institutions are needed to provide, credit, saving opportunities and insurance services to farmers and other value chain stakeholders who want to transform their practices and operating systems?
Exactly. They have a very big role in ensuring that they transform their financing instruments to think climate, to fund climate and to look at climate impact. But we also have these financiers whom we call impact investors who are looking for climate impact. So these are the key investors that we want to look out for, and to say, like a multi-stakeholder platform, we have a whole thematic working group that is concerned with looking for these investors and linking them with other entrepreneurs. And so we've had a number like Oiko Credit talking to our communities and telling them that we are looking for climate impact. We have SNV working on climate impact and they're looking for SMEs there. We have Solidaridad having one on Plus Plus looking for climate impact. So we need more SMEs to access this finance and make the enterprises to be more climate resilient.
All right. So PS Boga, so talk to us about the climate smart agriculture planning and expenditure, because this is really important.
Yeah, in terms of, it's the most important thing is that there is a practice of farming that goes on in Kenya, most of which is not climate friendly. And so in our strategies, in our policies, in our interventions, we are trying to shift that practice, that culture, so that we go more towards climate smart solutions. The World Bank project, the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture project, but all our projects must have the climate at heart. So I don't think we need a specific funding for it. Any funding that goes into agriculture must embed in it the element of being climate conscious. And any interventions must embed in it the element of being climate conscious. Any investment in the country must be climate smart, whether it's in agriculture or it's another sector. I think the most important thing is that whatever money we spend, we don't need separate money for climate while the other money continues to destroy the climate. All the money, all the projects must be designed with the climate in mind.
All right, so if I got you right, PS Boga, what you're telling us is that coordination in climate smart agriculture, planning and budgeting among different agencies at the national and the county levels is critical to ensuring coherence in implementation of national objectives.
Right now I have a budget of like 50 billion for agriculture. All of it must be spent on a climate conscious mode. And the counties, whatever they have, they must also spend with climate in mind. Because all that is needed is a shift in behavior and practice and consciousness of the people. It doesn't need more money. It needs the money that is there to be spent with the climate in mind.
All right. Such a good answer, right? That everyone has their roles to play. You know, PS Boga, I just like the way you put it, very clear. It's straight and clear. You have your role to play, so play your role. The government will also play its role. But then, As we bring this conversation to an end, ladies and gentlemen, I have a few minutes, so I need to divide this few minutes that I have amongst the four of you. So let me begin with Kathogo in just 2 minutes. And so at least let me request all of us to take 2 minutes to respond to this, because I need to pave way for the next production of Law Mashinani. Mr. Kathogo, talk to us about food security in relation to climate smart agriculture.
Thanks, Brenda. Indeed, I'll make sure I'll stick to the 2 minutes, because I know we've also discussed quite a lot, but I think this forum is not enough to discuss everything. Going back to your question on food security and climate change, very important. Just to touch on, ensure that indeed, as we grow the crops that we do have, it's very important that the crops that we grow, the livestock that we keep, the fish, the bees and everything that contributes to the agriculture sector are grown, are kept in a climate smart way. But at the same time, very important that we consider food safety for our population. Indeed, we've seen cases whereby food poisoning coming from, on farm, or what we call in situ, where the food is grown, can lead to quite a number of issues. Maybe, if I may use an example, is, lead poisoning that comes from bioaccumulation of lead in either fish or in either the crops that we eat, the vegetables that we eat, are all related to what we use when it comes to the planting or the keeping of these particular food sources. So it's all about transitioning to a climate smart agriculture, but at the same time ensuring that the food that we eat is safe for the population, but also it's good for our health. Simply because we want good food. Everybody, I now believe, we are very conscious, and we've seen just some exposés that are run in the media where it talks about, issues of contamination going into our food and how that risks the population when it comes to, terminal diseases like cancer. So indeed, when you're talking about climate smart agriculture, we are addressing all those pertinent issues that are affecting society or that are affecting the end users of this particular agricultural product.
So, Mr. Mbogo, what is the future of the young people in Kenya in this wake of climate change?
First, climate change really is a threat to how agriculture is done in this country. And we cannot run away from that fact that we are facing a planetary emergency, and Africa and Kenya is particularly vulnerable. I will say this, that we contribute about 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. We only contribute 4%, but we are the ones who face the veracity of climate change impacts. And so if it's droughts, if it's floods, if it's pests and diseases, we even have now the desert locusts. All these things really compound to make agriculture really difficult. And so that's why I see that the future of youth in agriculture should be a future where they consider climate smart agriculture. Because with climate smart agriculture, then you can be able to grow even when it's not raining. As Professor said, we do not require rain to grow food, we require water to grow food. And so that is the kind of mind shift that we really need to take. And this requires, I think, a change of perception to the way agriculture really is done. We did a small survey in one of the universities to think about how do young people perceive climate change, how do young people perceive agriculture. And so we asked them to paint the first thing that comes to their mind once the word agriculture was mentioned. And what they painted was really conspicuous, because they drew a very old man, showing that agriculture is not for the young people. That old man was standing next to a grass-thatched hut, which is a symbol of poverty. Then he was holding a garden hoe, a djembe, which shows that there's very little space for innovation and mechanization and digitalization of agriculture. And that old man was really under the scorching sun, just showing that agriculture is difficult and manual. But we can see agriculture, climate smart agriculture, really coming to solve all these challenges, because we have climate smart technologies which can be able to endear young people towards agriculture. These technologies make work easier to be done. They also increase the incomes for for these young people. And as we said, if agriculture is profitable and it's sustainable, then the young people have no problem getting into it.
All right, Nancy, in 2 minutes as we wind up, what is the future of agriculture in Kenya, owing to actually during this time of climate change, owing to the fact that you work with, you work with the different farmers, different types of farmers in Kakamega County. So what is the future as they look at the climate change when it comes to matters climate-smart agriculture?
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Actually, I work regionally beyond Kakamega. I work in Kenya, I work in Tanzania, I work in Uganda. But the COVID situation has made me to work from home, which is Kakamega, and run away from the Nairobi skyscrapers a bit to relax in the ecosystems. But I think what is important is that the future of agriculture is bright, and what we need to do is that as actors, we need to support farmers to identify their climate risks and plan in a climate-smart way and undertake climate-responsive interventions. But as a government, if we do the best in terms of giving the farmers the right information, ensuring access to the right technologies, and the private sector coming in to even support on technology access, technology development. So I think we are doing well, and I think the future is quite bright, and agriculture is the best way this country is going to transform into a better income country. Right. So I believe that the future for agriculture is bright, but we need to transform our thinking to be climate conscious, climate smart. But I believe with climate finance and climate risk information from meteorology being accurate, and when scientists do their work in terms of research, then the sector is going to be transformed.
All right. PS, Boga, are we food secure in terms of, is the country food secure in terms of the climate smart agriculture?
Yeah, all our strategies and interventions are geared towards 100% food and nutrition security. Of course, we don't produce all our food. We import part of it from the region and also from the rest of the world. So I would say we are 75% food secure. But our strategy is to make sure that the smallholder farmer earns more from their work, and that we grow our agriculture to be able to produce and process more. But in doing all that, the household is resilient to any issues that have to do with either climate, diseases, or pests. And I think at the heart of our system is the fact that we need to invest more in knowledge systems so that we can get the solutions that will address the challenges that we face. And most important is, I think, to raise the level of consciousness from our kids to our young men and women, to ourselves, to our investors, so that in all our policies, be they in agriculture or in other sectors, that we are conscious of the impact of the human footprint on the climate, and the fact that we cannot continue with business as usual if we want to be food secure and if we want to be safe from the challenges that come with climate change.
All right, PS Hamadi Idi Boga, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Let me just take you through once again the profiles of the guests that I had this morning. So I had Victor Kadzogo, who has more than 10 years experience in energy, climate change and environment development sector network, sector work rather. He currently works with SNV Netherlands Development Organization in the Voices for Change project that seeks to enhance the resilience of pastoralists to climate change through evidence-based advocacy for inclusive policies and legislative frameworks. So I'd like to say Asante Sana, Mr. Victor Kadzogo. Then also from the government, you also had Professor Dr. Hamadi Idi Boga, who is the PS Principal Secretary Crop Development and Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries and Cooperatives. He has a BSc, that is Bachelor of Science in Botany and Zoology, and Masters in Science in Botany, Microbiology from Kenyatta University in Kenya, PhD holder in Microbial Ecology and Microbiology from University of Constance, Germany, and a postdoctoral research stay at the Max Planck Institute for Microbiology in Marburg, Germany. Thank you so much, Bwana PS, for talking to us this morning. We also had a lady in this panel, and that is Rapando Nancy, who is a steering committee member of the ClimateSmart Agriculture Multi-Stakeholder Platform for Kenya, championed by the Ministry of Agriculture. Nancy is a climate specialist, and that's why we had her, and has worked across East and Central Africa in developing capacities for policy and practices on climate change in agriculture, with a special interest in agriculture supply chain. She has worked with the private sector and government departments on building capacities towards a climate resilient agricultural sector. Nancy, asante sana for joining us. And finally, we had Victor Mugo, a regional coordinator, ClimateSmart Agriculture Youth Network. He is the regional coordinator for the ClimateSmart Agriculture Youth Network, a lead author. He's also a writer for UNEP's Global Environmental Outlook for Youth Africa, and Bolag Adenisina, I hope I pronounced that properly, fellow Victor, was named the Youth of the Year Agri-Business category and featured in the list of the top 35 under 35 youth in Kenya, doing such an amazing job for young people here in the country. Once again, Victor Mugo, asante sana. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, asanteni sana. My name is Brenda Zeda Radira. Pave way for the next production, that is Leo Mashinani, as we continue bringing you up to date with what is making the headlines in the country. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
With ongoing concerns over climate change, the role of various agricultural practices has been put on the spotlight for destruction of the environment and directly contributing towards global warming. Farmers and other stakeholders in the agricultural sector have been challenged to re-evaluate and improve their practices to be sustainable and ecologically friendly. Keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at KTN News KE, #FarmKenya, and at FarmKenya254 on Twitter.